you are a homeopath.
Mhm.
What is homeopathy?
So this is a big question, really, but
Mm-hmm.
I will start with going right back to the beginning at the founding of homeopathy by a doctor called Dr. Samuel Hahnemann,
Mm-hmm.
and he was born in Germany in the mid 1700s, and he was actually a medical doctor, and he then actually, when he graduated medicine, he didn't really like the way that medicine was going back then. He thought this is all really weird and wrong. At the time, they were doing what was called heroic medicine, which meant bloodletting and using mercury and things like that. And he really felt like, oh, this just is not right. And so he actually didn't continue with practicing as a doctor. He was a very, very clever man, and he had a job. He spoke 11 languages, and he got a job translating medical textbooks. And so back then he was translating a medical textbook, and he noticed that it was on poisonings, actually. And he noticed that there was a certain type of bark from a tree that, when in its poisoned form, was causing symptoms that looked a lot like malaria. And he was thinking, that's really interesting. So if you have too much of that bark somehow, because probably it was being used as a herbal medicine, then it looks like you have malaria. How interesting is that? And, through, you know, his intuition, most likely, he went, I wonder what happens then if we reduce the dose of that bark, like what happens? And what happens if you were to give that bark to someone with malaria? Okay, so, and this kind of brought about one of the main laws of homeopathy, which is the principle of like cures like. So we give the same substance. I'm going to use a really, really easy example, and that's coffee. And so if you have too much coffee, your heart will race, you might get a bit hot, you won't be able to sleep, you might get a bit anxious, you might get a little bit sweaty. And if somebody presents in our clinic like that, we can give the remedy made from coffee, which is called coffea. And it's almost like it cancels out the symptoms. The thing is, we're not giving coffee in a crude form. We're giving coffee in a minute dose. So we take the coffee and we dilute it over to a different potency. We have very different potencies, but we dilute it in a series of dilutions. And in between those dilutions, we do what's called succussion, which is banging the remedy. Samuel Hahnemann used to do it against a book, the Bible, most likely. And this kind of energizes the remedy. And so homeopathy is an energetic medicine because sometimes we're working with dilutions that are much, much higher than it is known that it still holds a material dose. However, there is a lot more research coming out about ultra high dilutions and how water actually carries the energy of a substance. And, there's so much out there at the moment about water, actually, and all the phases of water, and also the very interesting nature of water. There's a lady from New Zealand called Veda Austin who's doing a lot of research and showing how water carries memory. So basically, that's what we're doing. We're taking a substance, we prepare it in a dilution in a very systematic way, and we see what that remedy is for, or what that substance is for homeopathically, and we give it to a patient that may be producing the symptoms of that. So Samuel Hahnemann, he started experimenting with this. It's called China officinalis. He started experimenting with this bark of the tree and taking it himself, and taking it and then diluting it, and then he started to give it to people with malaria. And he noticed that it cancelled out their symptoms. So this is kind of the premise. He also we also have another major law, I guess, of homeopathy, which is the law of minimum dose, which is really how much do we need to give to a person to heal them? How much of a substance do we need to give? And for example, with Panadol or paracetamol, at a very high dose, we know it can kill you. At a certain dose, it can, take away inflammation in your body. Okay. And then there's a dose where it will do nothing. So there's this kind of scale of dose. It's a principle called hormesis. And actually Paracelsus talked about this principle a long time ago as well. How much of a substance do we need for it to be curative? And so it kind of homeopathy turns the whole thing on its head, because previously we thought it had to be a huge material dose for something to be curative, but it doesn't always. And that's what we see with homeopathy, that we can shift, we can give someone's body, give a patient that remedy in a certain potency, and that will start the body actually bringing itself back into balance. Because we also talk about in homeopathy, we talk about the vital force. And the vital force is what animates us. And if you think when we're born and the intelligence of the body in starting to grow, starting to form limbs and organs, like this magical alchemical process that happens from one cell, it turns into a human being. There is an animation to that, and that is the vital force, knowing what it needs to be doing. So basically homeopathy is all about working with the vital force as well. It's not working against it. It's not squashing things down. It's not taking away. We don't kill things like antibiotics and even herbal medicine can do. We don't work like that. We work with the body. And so we give it a little flick or a little nudge with a remedy saying, we can see the symptoms. Here is the substance. Now you do the healing yourself. So it can be very fast, and it can be a process of peeling back layers to understand or to get to a place of healing. It really just depends on where somebody is and what level of health they already have.